with the secret history living in your aquarium. Let me get the humidity off the lens there. I am hoping to see some familiar faces. I know I'm going a little earlier. It has to do with just how I've been doing with my back, honestly. My since the back surgery, I'm healing up well and everything, but I am just extremely prone to getting tired, and also the the one medication other than Tylenol that I am taking is muscle relaxers, and so to do this show, and make videos the last week or so, I've had to take those, then do it, and then I start to get tired. So basically, I have a little bit of a window. Today, though, I want to talk about politics. Exciting, right, guys? I know that everybody loves politics. So, what I want to discuss today, and we can talk about fish questions intermixed and look at tanks or whatever y'all want to do. This is a democracy of a channel, after all. But I want to cover essentially, again, some of the details of what's going on in the Lacey Act. Can you guys hear me? Is anybody else having sound issues? And I also want to cover, honestly, how we can realistically make an impact on this either happening or not happening. Can anybody else not hear? I'm seeing people saying, I see two people who say they can't hear. So yeah, if you have a question for me, put it at, okay, thanks, audio and video is good, so it must be on their end, or YouTube screwed up again somehow. So in any case, I have been politically active, and actually I started at a young age. I grew up in Seattle, obviously, if you know the channel. And due to that, we are a very rowdy city, politically speaking. Outside the city is very blue collar, and the east side of the state is very, very conservative and traditionally Republican. The outskirts and central mountain part of the state, as well as the peninsula part of the state, is extremely, extremely independent, and was actually founded by both labor unionists, anarchists, anti-industrialists, all like 100 to 150 years ago. There's actually battles, or if you want to call them wars, where dozens of people fought it out with the government. So over whatever it may be that they wanted at that time. Some were anti-union, some were pro-union, some were they didn't think that the world should have industrial plants, and so there were these basically they call them Luddites that were against any mechanized machinery because they said that was taking jobs from human beings. And so they would go and they would destroy like steamships and boilers and lumber mills and stuff. So there's a lot of crazy history here, and I guess that kind of was in my blood. Now, my grandfather was in the military in World War II and the Korean War. He was career military for quite some time, and was basically joined up for World War II as 17 years old, and then ended up staying until 1959 or 1960. And he was actually, as conservative as he was one of the founders of Greenpeace. So he got together with a bunch of Sierra Club folks and a bunch of other activists, and he was specifically what he cared about. He had a botany undergrad degree, 4-year degree, and then he had a pharmacy, a pharmacology, pharmacist degree, as well as what do you call it? The first part of your medical school. So he went to the medical school. He didn't do the in setting medical stuff. So, well-informed and intelligent guy, and he was, haha, Robs, thank you so much for the super chat. Speaking of politically active, uh, Mr. Pibb, Dr. Pibb, Pibb Extra, whatever it's called, uh, I'm on strike until Dr. Pepper will subsidize the channel, will sponsor the channel. Let it be heard, Dr. Pepper. So in any case, he was very active in preventing logging of old growth forests here in Washington. And in the 70s up through the 80s and even early 90s, there was a lot of conflict over the spotted owl. And that was from Northern California, all of Oregon, and part of Washington. Basically, whether they should preserve the habitat or log it. And it got very violent. There were shootouts over it, loggers wanting to harvest it and saying that the Endangered Species Act was putting everything on hold. And the same is true with another decision called the Bolt decision, which decided that the Native Americans could have a share of the fishery runs, that they could have a share that was before all the commercial licenses and things were sold, and that they could also commercially harvest some of it too, because one of the few things they got in their treaty when they gave up all of Western Washington was they got put onto an area of land known as the Tulalip Reservation, and also there's a number of reservations, but the Tulalip Reservation is the main one. And they got put onto those and gave up basically all their rights to anything else, and they agreed to live in this muddy estuary floodplain, which basically the Europeans saw as a place that wasn't buildable and was too shallow to be a port. And then they realized that actually you could gold mine in that area, and that there was a river that came out that had some gold in it potentially. So they carved up that and basically cut off access to the river. So there's this crazy long history in the state of essentially the Native Americans being deprived of their treaty rights from the Point Elliott Treaty of 1865. And then in the 70s, they kind of tried to make up for that with a pretty liberal ruling. And it entered territory where people got really mad at the Native Americans. River Girl, thank you for coming in. And Don Gallagher, hello. Silver Creek Aquarium. What's up, Jason and other Jason? And let's see here. Geek Boy, what is going on, brother? Good to see you. Nicole Howard, Aquaballs, Dude, Misfits, Reptiles, and Aquatics. Laura Sutton, what's up? Brian Levy, or Levy. Still don't know what I'm supposed to say, but I don't want to offend you anyway. Rob's, obviously, and I need a dab. And Fishbrella. So, River Girl, if you want to join the channel, if you get out of the live chat, there should be a little arrow that drops down that says description, and you should be able to click a button that says join. And for $1.99, you can join. You can join for more than that, but that's all I ask is $1.99. And anything more is kind of just charity towards the channel, essentially, and me. You can also go to the description of the video, and there should be a link in there that says join channel, become a member, and you should be able to go to that link as long as it's not broken or anything. Hey, oh, right on. Thank you so much, Rob's Ray TV. I appreciate it, brother. Welcome to the Secret Supporter. So for members, just real quick too, you guys get the special perks of sneak peeks at ideas that I'm working on. I ask you guys polls, and then I show you guys extra photos or side projects I'm working on. If I'm have a rare plant or shrimp that I feel like shipping, or if you are an aquarist that's local to me, I sell to you guys. You guys get the first notice on that. And, oh, we've got a raid, huh? Cold Water Aquatic. Well, thank you so much, Cold Water. I appreciate sending over. So, Brookley Bell, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate that very much. Let's see here. Aquariums and terrariums. Carl Gwivin, Wavin, Hippie, Hippie John the Fisherman, Crypt Keeper. Oh wow, we got lots of folks rolling in. Well, good to see all of you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Lori, what's up? And Snoochy Booch, what's up? Good to see everybody. Well, thank you for signing up as a member. I appreciate it. It helps me. It's reliable. Super chats are great and all, but that really is a nice, reliable. Like, okay, I got $400 coming in from everybody together that I can use on fish food, medicine, whatever, and then super chats and things. I can do whatever. All right, let's see here. So let's get back to the subject at hand, which is basically, I grew up with a lot of politics. I was raised by a guy who was militaristic in the sense that he was in the military. He was a drill sergeant for a good chunk of his career. And I was punished as a child. He helped raise me a lot. And when I didn't know the answer to questions like when we were on a road trip, like how tall is that mountain and what is that peak? What's the second tallest peak? Sometimes he'd even ask, like, what's the route to the top? What's that tree? Is it a native or is it from overseas? And things like that. He was a quiz master and basically just a taskmaster. And if I got it wrong, he would give me push-ups, sit-ups, varnishing his railings, or yard work. And so he was a strict dude, but one of the things from an early age, so I say 20 years of activism experience that I have in the thumbnail, but it's really more like 25. From the age of 7 or 8, I was going with him to the Capitol, and we'd go and knock on the door of, at that point, you could still get a hold of an actual senator or a representative. Sometimes you still can, but usually now you're speaking with a page or a specialist that is hired to know something about that subject or that genre of what you're speaking on. So what I want to talk about today are some of the tactics and what you could write, who you can write. So in the description below, the first links, there's a link that's going to tell you about what this bill could potentially do. Now, a lot of people are saying the sky is falling, and a lot of people are saying, oh, just chill, the lobbyists will cover it, they'll knock it out of the park. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I was watching Dan's Fish the other night, and they had the vice president of PJAC, their public relations manager, and that is the lobbyist group for the pet trade and the fish business and, Petco, PetSmart, all those kind of places. And he said, honestly, this one, we don't got it. We need people to grassroots write in. We need people to speak with their representatives. And so that's what I'm going to talk about is I, for years, have been involved in this. I have the only arrests I have on my adult record are about 6 arrests for obstructing an intersection. I was charged with disrupting interstate commerce, which was going to be a felony, because when I was 18, I laid down on the freeway when the Iraq War was beginning, Iraq and Afghan bombing campaigns, the whole shock and awe thing, if you guys are old enough to remember. I was in high school, I was a senior, and I led a walkout, and then we laid down on I-5, our main interstate. They tear gassed us, they beat us, they pepper sprayed us, then they arrested us, and then they put us on Homeland Security's watch list. But, that being said, I went from this kind of radical place of being at every protest, being at, not that I necessarily am going to say I was fighting the police, but once they would come in, I have bike locked myself to things. I have built tree sits. I've built triangular structures that hang on the railroad tracks, so that if they try to take it down, they would knock you over and you'd fall about 20 feet and smash yourself. So there's all sorts of interesting tactics you can use, and I was very passionate about that, about the war specifically, the two wars going on. Yeah, basically that we had people on the ground. That is a discussion for another time, and I don't have anything, by the way, against anyone in the military. It was just I had something against the WMD, that whole narrative after September 11th. So, back to fish, on track. I've also done a lot of work, whether it's writing grants or talking to lobbyists or things like that, for various issues that I really care about, that I love. And, you know, I have tried a lot of tactics. I've seen a lot of things fail. And one thing we need to understand is that an analogy that someone that I really like has put forth is that when you have an issue, you have a spear. And pretend this is this the best spear looking thing I have, Andy? Yeah, sure. This is the spear. And up here you have your ideologues. You have your diehards, your theorists. So that's people that are maybe going to be, they own a store. Maybe they are doing research and they've invested all their money, their earthly possessions into a fish room. And this legislation potentially would eliminate all those rare species that they care for. Behind that, you're going to have people that are they're not the tip of the spear, that are going to be literally out there and suffering the consequences big time. They're not going to be the ones who are laying it all on the line, you know, putting down big money, hundreds of thousands of dollars to PJAC or other groups like that. And then the back here is more like hobbyists and pet owners who care about it. It really matters and all that. But they're probably going to write a senator, maybe sign a petition or click a button or donate $4 or $5. And that's great. We need those people. But all change, whether it's social or whether it is manufactured by laws, all of it requires a change in the minds and in the narrative of whatever that topic is. So whether we're talking about something socially, you know, then it requires, for instance, anti-segregation. Let's talk about that. So it requires that people not only say, I don't think that races should be segregated. I think we should desegregate schools. It takes somebody to say, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to break the law, and I'm going to take it to court, and lawyers to say, I'm going to do it for free, and I'm going to back it, or people to protest daily on the streets. Those people who sacrifice themselves, who go into the school and break the law to get things going, that's the tip of the spear. A lot of people think that and a lot of times the tip of the spear is very, very dismissive of the whole shaft of the spear, the whole thing that gives the spear its energy. Yes, if living at the tip of the spear is tiring, it's taxing, it takes a lot of energy and initiative. But those people next behind it, where that metal attachment of the spear is fixed onto the spear, and really you've got that forward grip, that the thing that makes it a spear. You could basically call it a spear even without the rest of the shaft. It's a dagger or a spear. That's going to be all those pet keepers. That's going to be during segregation the people who were protesting, who were doing sit-ins, who were doing the ideological, they agree, but their life's not consumed by it, and they can help by doing little things here or there. Maybe if there's an event nearby. Now I'm saying, for us, we have a spear tip. We have those people up here. If you want to join them, that is fine. And there are ways to do that. I'm going to guess that if you join the tip of the spear on this campaign, you're probably already engrossed in it. You probably already have a plan of action. Now, I would consider myself somewhere behind the tip of the spear, especially because I'm a little out of action with my back issues right now. But I do plan to go visit my senator's office, and I'm going to reveal that I haven't voted for Democrats locally, well, in about 15 years. Since the first time I voted, basically. The second time I voted, they did not get it. So I have not voted for Republicans, on ticket lines either. I have been an independent. I have voted for independent or third-party candidates, as well as a mix of Democrats and Republicans. I really hate the partisan stuff because I think it's counterproductive. But I'm just telling you that because in my state, we have two senators, Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray, who happen to be Democrats. This bill is being pushed by Democrats. Now, just because the bill is being pushed doesn't mean this initiative is. In fact, the great thing about our opportunity to strike in this moment is that this bill is not even really related to fish and pets. It is about stopping human smuggling. It is about stopping unfair advantages in markets overseas and outsourcing jobs and labor. So it's not really they don't have a dog in the fight yet, one way or the other, most likely. Senator Rubio and also one of the senators from Hawaii are the ones who slipped this bill in, and Rubio is a Republican. So there is an opportunity in any sort of political fight, any sort of campaign or protest. Use leverage when you've got it. You have to be careful about this because you don't want to be super partisan, but you can say, your opposition. If you're writing a Democratic representative, from the Democratic Party, you can say, you know what, this is a Republican-backed bill. That right there aligns the interest with, their typical opposition. Now, you can also keep politics out of this. That's probably also a really smart way to do it. But I'm just saying it depends on how much you want to get into it. Mick is saying it was crazy to hear on Dan's stream, Bob Likens. He was explaining the bill is actually 600 bills mashed up into one. Yes, that is how America does things. It's an act. And when we do an act like Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, they throw in thousands of pages sometimes. And what that is called is pork barrel spending or pet projects or earmarks. And basically, whenever we have a big issue that one party agrees on, or even both parties agree on, like, for instance, funding a war or military spending budgets, America's usually like all in on that. And so what happens is people who can't usually get their projects passed, they slip it in because they're allowed to attach anything that's vaguely related to it. And they're saying because the fish are going interstate, and that's commerce, interstate commerce, and that's economic, that's kind of their hook into why it should be added onto this bill. And it will ban that. It will ban any species on the blacklist, which is every species other than the ones that will be approved for the white list. It will ban them. Now, another thing that I want to just mention before we get back to the spear analogy and before we get back to tactics is that this law, in the most liberal readings of it, would and I mean liberal as in not Democrat or Republican, but traditional political theory. Liberal interpretation is very, very extreme because there are no hard definitions, rules, amounts, or guidelines. So whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, this law basically says, here, Secretary of the Interior, you have the power to make anything you want illegal for 3 years automatically for no reason or for a good reason. Could be either one. So you have those people who think that this is a great thing, and maybe, for instance, PETA likes this bill. And what they're doing is they're saying, well, that's awesome. We've got someone in there that is super, super concerned about invasive species, the damage that they do. And immediately they assume, well, that person that's in there right now under this administration is gonna ban the this and the that, and you know, they think maybe they're gonna even ban the majority of pets, you know, ferrets and hedgehogs and snakes of any sort, other than maybe a few species that are not going to survive in the U.S. or something, that are non-venomous and whatnot. But regardless of that, they don't consider that when you make a law, you make it for the next administration also. So even though this sounds bizarre, pretend like you hate you hate the law, and you think that every animal should be allowed, from arowanas to snakeheads to walking catfish to native species. Everything should be allowed. Well, the next election cycle, you could get somebody, and we saw this with Donald Trump. We saw people come in and say, you know what, EPA, I don't really need anybody in there, and gut it. You know, the same thing could happen to the Secretary of the Interior. That's one that, if you think about it, do you really hear about that position, that cabinet, very often? No, not unless you're politically active. And it could be on the chopping block. Say Donald Trump gets in another few years again, and he cuts it. Well, who's going to say yes or no to any species? Just nothing will happen. And it will sit there, and there is no other mechanism provided for us to get animals through. Likewise, say PETA's really happy right now. What if he puts someone in there that says, let's legalize everything. Yeah, let's make money off anything we can. Endangered rhinos, $5 for $1. And that may sound crazy, but it could happen because this bill does not limit anything right now. And in theory, they will put some constraints in it. They'll have a committee meeting and they'll flush out rules. But I'm just saying, right now, it is a blank check. So whether you like it or not, it's dangerous. Somebody else could endorse that check other than you who's expecting it. So in any case, back to the spirit analogy. If we are the people writing our senators, linked below, there is a list of all your representatives. You can still, even though it's already passed the House of Representatives, it doesn't hurt to talk to your local representatives. They are supposed to represent you and maybe a million other people in your area or so, or 500,000 people. So they want to get reelected. In every protest or every political campaign, we need to think about what is motivating people. And you can either say that people are being motivated by money. Maybe there's big pet stores, in theory, that want to just have 100 species of common tetras and hamsters and guinea pigs and get rid of everything else. No competition from independent pet stores. No competition from breeders or importers or transshippers. And maybe the money's coming from there. Now, I don't think that is the push of this. I think it's more of the environmental thing. And the environmental thing, usually I would say, oh, it's PETA, they want to get rid of pets, and they have a strong lobbying power. Well, it's not just PETA. This was drafted up in Florida. Some of the language was stolen from a bill or a proposal written up by a woman who works for Nancy Pelosi, and it actually came up and was tried to be slipped into another bill previously, about a year ago. And so it's not new language. It's not even well thought out language. But I do have to say, Florida and Hawaii spend hundreds of millions, if not billions, depending on what study you read, of dollars on mitigating and preventing invasive species, as well as controlling the ones they already have. They are two states that have a huge problem. Even Guam, they have a problem with these snakes now, and they've dropped poisoned mice from helicopters and just done so many things that are They sound kind of kooky and crazy, but trying to get a handle on this. And so I think honestly what the push is behind this current phase of things is economics. They don't want to pay for invasive species and the damage they do anymore. The problem is that this is a federal bill, obviously, and it says very clearly that if it is outlawed in any of the states, it is outlawed in all of the states, as well as the incredibly far away and tropical Guam and American Samoa and the American Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and Hawaii. That basically allows almost anything there that could survive outside of captivity to be a potential threat. Now, if we're thinking from the point of view of someone who doesn't care about pets and they just care about money, there's nothing to gain to them by allowing a small group of hobbyists to keep rare fish or pets. This bill would have had more nuance towards care species or endangered species, captive breeding programs, the Goodeids and things like that. They would have paid attention to things like that. Or even, for instance, big cats being bred at zoos in, say, Texas that are private. Not that those are always great or good, but there are more Bengal tigers left in Texas than there are in the wild. Now, there are those who think that this bill is just aimed at the really far out there, big time exotics. But the problem is, the way this bill's written, they're not going to go through all 32,000 known fish species. There's probably another 10,000 species we haven't cataloged yet, salt and fresh put together. And that's a conservative estimate. And so if you read this bill, it is once any of the states or territories puts it on a blacklist, automatically it's illegal in all of the other states and territories because they don't want you bringing it in. So if we're thinking about how we can change the minds of people, you need to basically think about the things that are causing them to want this. So if it's economic, what we need to do is show them in our letters. And let me just say this too. If you want to write a letter, if you want to go to PJAC, which is the pet lobbyist group, and they're great. It's good. It's if you don't have the time and you don't care enough about your fish to spend an hour or two on something, you just want to spend 5 or 10 minutes. I do get it. This stuff is boring and dry. But if you're on my channel, I take it that you are active and you do care. And basically, the easiest thing to do is going to be to sign up for PJAC's alerts and sit back and wait. Fill out their little thing that says, I agree, and they'll send a form letter in your name. Now, they're going to get, your senators or representatives are going to get a stack of form letters. The thing we also need to do, other than just writing senators, write your own letter, for one. If you can't go there in person, write a letter. Make a phone call. Do both. Write it to the state near your states that impact the trade of your states. Talk about how this is in how it's going to impact the economy. Talk about how some of the rarest species are kept by citizen scientists. How species that may disappear forever off the face of this earth or already are extinct in the wild only exist in the pet trade, only exist in our hobby. I mean, I have talked to countless professors and they tell you that we don't have those at the university. We don't have the resources to keep every species of fish that's going endangered or extinct on hand. We just really hope that someone, keeps these things in captivity. And so it's up to us to do these things. And so what we need to think about is, okay, so if economics are what's important, and maybe there's the other aspect, which is the other thing. So if you're in Florida or you're in Hawaii, you're going to be focusing, or you're writing those people, your focus is economic damage. You need to focus on not how much you love your pets and things. You need to think about how do I mitigate the invasive species thing? Or what is the alternative that makes the invasive amount of money spent seem not so significant? So I think that it's a good time as a hobby to say we do need laws on invasives, but you're saying that goldfish will still probably be allowed because they're one of the most common imports, and it sounds preposterous to ban goldfish to society, so that's probably not going to happen. But in fact, they can survive in Minnesota and in Canada, and they can overpopulate lakes and rivers like crazy. Carp are insane that way. Mountain minnows and things like that can too. Maybe we need to have maybe we need to make concessions as a hobby and say, look, in the past, people have been irresponsible. This needs to be addressed. That can be done the following ways. Maybe you need to just have, I mean, maybe it's something as simple as you have a little license or a tag, like when you go fishing. I don't want that, but I mean, get creative here, people. We all need to work together and think of this. But so say we have a senator in Florida or Georgia, and you want to make an impact. Talk to their main constituents also. If you can get a hold of, or you have a friend or family member that is in any sort of big business that has an influence on politics, we also need, as a spear, you're looking for weak spots in the armor. And the head of the spear is going to pry at those weak spots. And then once we find it, the rest of the spear, all the people and the second hand and the body puts all the weight into it. And so let me finish that spear analogy, and then we'll get into a tactic about Florida and the spots where this invasive issue is most key. So basically, that spear, we got the initial ideologues and people on the front lines putting everything on the line. Then you've got the people writing letters and senators. Then you've got the people that you just talk to in conversation, and you say, hey, what do you think about this? And they just say, yeah, that seems pretty crazy to outlaw every animal, like, by default, and they haven't defined, like, what minimum quantities means or any of that stuff. So just informing them and then thinking there's something odd or wrong there, that puts them in the majority of people. And that's part of the battle too. Engage with your friends and family. You don't need to be annoying about it. But the other thing that's very helpful is when you're looking at persuading someone. So say you want to get your friends and family to write a letter. And those people are not going to write a very specialized letter like a fish owner, or like an owner of a fish store may do, or like a lobbyist group will do. You need to get those people, they're going to do what they do up here at the tip of the spear. Us fish keepers and somewhere in between people, maybe we're looking for guidance, and we'll talk about that next. But the people who are back here and just kind of agree, and they are also voters in your area, they make a difference. They might sign a change.org petition if you bug them enough, if you send it to them on Facebook or whatnot. But when you're trying to change minds, there is basically something called the Socratic method of arguments or logic and convincing debate. It has a lot of names, but it's also been applied to improv. And what it is basically there are a couple rules. If you've ever watched Whose Line Is It Anyways, this is the same way you're going to get people to come over and win an argument, or at least come to your side. And the first is yes and. So you listen to whatever they're saying and build on it. Reinforce whatever they said. So do you say, hey, have you ever had a pet? Okay, yeah. Did you ever have a hamster? Okay, yeah. Well, if hamsters got out in certain areas, maybe Colorado, for instance, there's a chance that, or Arizona, there's a chance that they could be very detrimental to the environment. But that hasn't happened, and you know whatever angle that works for them. Now you need to be educated about the topic, but you build upon whatever it is, wherever they're starting from, you meet them there. And improv works the same way. If you have a skit and it's like, hi, I'm a school teacher, the other person doesn't know anything. You have to say, yes, and as a school teacher, I'm your student. You know, you have to go along with it. Now, the second thing you want to do is encourage your partner or encourage the person you're debating with. So, stroke their ego a little bit. Let them know that they're on the right path, they're doing well. What you don't want to do is kill the improv or kill the debate. So never resort to ad hominem name calling. Never say, "Oh, you snowflake," or "you this," or that's not going to go anywhere. If the argument's over and you don't want to even make progress, fine. Call him an effing idiot and whatever. But that is a dead end. If you have any hope of changing minds, and remember, most people on this issue are in the back of the spear. They are the main thrust we're going to need at the end to get the tip of the spear to do damage. We're going to need them. So this is really important. And the other thing that you want to do is basically lead them into more places that they know. So take it a step further. You develop a narrative is the next step. And so you've already agreed with them, you've reinforced them, you're not making them look stupid or feel stupid, you're not calling them names, obviously. And we are then going to inform them of the topic broader while also kind of doing the compliment sandwich thing. So I'm just saying that these are some helpful little ways. And I know that this is all basic stuff and it's like, what does that have to do with fish keeping or anything? But I think it's helpful to have in mind because it gets really easy to be frustrated when you talk to, yeah, Xanadudu. So don't tell the person you're trying to influence that they're being butthurt. Yeah, don't do that. So yes, you keep going into the. Oh, thank you, Mary. Mary's sharing the links from the description. Thank you so much. So there's a link to find your senator, your representative, and there's a link to an Amazonas article that kind of goes over what this bill does or doesn't cover. And there's also a link to change.org to one of the petitions. If you haven't signed that yet, just go ahead. I need to add the PJAC link, which is they'll email you when this bill is coming up for review or vote, and they'll know. They're in DC and they are on it like flies on fly-loving things. Poo. They're like flies on poo. Okay, so the other important thing when you're forming your strategy is we're using the spear and we're trying to get under the armor, the weak spots and things, and we're trying to figure out what is it they're fighting with. If they have an axe, they're fighting this battle with an axe, and their axe is all economics. I don't want to pay for having to hunt down pythons in the Everglades anymore, for instance. That might be Rubio's angle. Now, we also need to kind of think about, well, or is their angle that there's these big companies that only want to sell a couple fish, and they want to basically take out all the mom and pop importers and mom and pop pet stores. And basically, you've seen how the fish section has dwindled in the big box stores. There's some people that are of that opinion. Now, I do have to say that Seagrass Farms and ZooMed and Central Pet, a lot of the bigger corporations are also giving the most money to PJAC and ARC, US ARC, and other groups that are fighting for preventing this bill. But they don't have some magic backdoor solution or key to stopping this bill. You know, we need to get the attention of our elected officials. We need to show them what do the officials want before you even talk about this bill. They want to get reelected, they want to get campaign funding, and they want to look good. They want their base to like them. Who doesn't want to look good? So what we need to do is, instead of coming up with problems and negativity, we need to come up with solutions. And that's the same with the improv thing. You need to offer yes and then reroute that conversation. instead of basically invasives are a big problem. If you can feel out that that is their hesitation or that is their worry, then you can say, well, is it the economic issues or impact of that that bugs you? And then you can say, well, have you looked into that? Well, did you know that Hurricane Andrew and other hurricanes have been one of the main things? So perhaps that caused invasives to get out into Florida. So perhaps maybe having better protocols for locking any place with fish farms outside, big ponds out in the open that could flood, maybe having a permit requiring to build a berm a foot taller, or requiring that they have that they net them and put them in an indoor tank or whatever. I mean, you want to think of the least expensive solution, so that's probably not a good one, that last one. But whatever it may be, you want to think of how that's going to work. And Bunny Viper is totally correct. She says it also pays to research your senators a bit. Look for common ground, either professionally or even better personally. What do you share in common? How can you relate? Use this info. Exactly. So what I'm saying in my letter is I have several angles. One is emotional, human to human. Everybody's a human. Most people can connect on that level. However, if that's your main angle, that won't stop them from doing something unless they really care about you, or it impacts their money bottom line or their next vote bottom line. So one thing you could say is, in our district, 30% of constituents own a pet other than a cat or dog. You can look up these kind of statistics. Find one that works for your argument. If you're in D.C. or if you're, or I mean, like Virginia, or you're talking to somebody who's in a big city metropolis area, New York, or the D.C. Beltway area, or L.A. I mean, you ask, like, what are we afraid of it getting out into the city? It won't live there. The reasons it won't live there, and the number of species that are on the list that wouldn't survive. Look into something like that. Or you might want to say something like the economics of, in this city we have X amount of pet stores. Each pet store, and you can do the work, you can call someone and ask too. Each pet store maybe brings in $200,000 a year in profits on average in our city. Each one of those pet stores is next to a food stand or a restaurant. Each day those employees go to lunch, and each day those employees drive to work and buy gas. And by the time you add all this up, around the world, over 500,000 native indigenous people work some way related into collecting fish. In South America alone, over 80,000 people in Colombia, Peru, and Brazil work in the fish trade, either collecting, wholesaling, breeding, or just in some way or another. Maybe they own a pet store, maybe they own a trans-shipping company, maybe they just sell fish heads and fish meal that they grind up into food. Whatever it may be, look into those not so clear aspects and add them up. Exaggerate. When the DEA or the cops make a case against someone, you know how they do it, how they do possession. So say you're growing a bunch of bud and they bust a grow house. They weigh it in the pots with the dirt, and that's what they charge you with usually. Same with if they find something in a bag or whatever, they'll weigh it in the bag, and the bag may weigh more than the substance in the bag. So these are dirty tricks of rounding up or sliding the average in your favor, but we need to be looking at that. And obviously, good information that makes a point is best, but if you don't have that, then we need to look for these other things. We need to look for these weak points in the armor. So something that people could be doing now is maybe looking up this information. Maybe other YouTubers or people who research, if you're watching and you're into this stuff, maybe you could be looking up things like, how many pet stores are there in the US? How many billions of dollars is this industry? What happened in Germany in the 80s when things were outlawed? How big was that black market? Things like that. We need to be understanding what the impact may be. So look for all the facets of that. Now, other than economic and saying, yes, we as a hobby need to be more responsible, but we should not be punished and made guilty for the crimes of irresponsible owners in the past. In fact, we should educate people better. You know, we should have more of a, if we had more of a thriving pet culture, people maybe wouldn't even think about these things as yeah, I'm gonna throw my fish elsewhere. Also, if fish become blacklisted and you have nowhere to take them, this law provides nothing in the way of guidance of what to do. It says it's illegal, and under the Lacey Act right now, it is $25,000 to $250,000 per fish that you have that's blacklisted, and up to 5 years in prison for your first offense, up to 15 years in prison for a second offense. So say they outlaw a common pleco, that is a steep price to pay. Now, what I want to do is read you guys my, I want to read you guys the letter I wrote to my own senators. And maybe that can help outline things. I hope I don't lose the chat at all when I try to pull this up. But it goes over things like we already have international law, UN law, so international governing bodies. We have the Endangered Species Act. We have the IUCN Red List. We have the Lacey Act, which is over 100 years old. We have ways of putting people away for 25 years, you know, if they have a bunch of animals all at once, if they're guilty of more than 10 crimes at once. I would say that's a big enough hammer to solve this problem if they need to come down on it. The other angle, in case I lose you guys, the other angle that I want to say is that, yes, then talk about the personal things, which is I have benefited from this hobby, not just because of I like it. It's not just a luxury. It has saved my life. In my case, that's true. Now, you have to say what's true to your heart. People can sense sincerity. But when you're depressed, when you're down, if you have chronic pain, if you're overcoming substance abuse, an abusive relationship, PTSD from war. I have heard literally now in the 5.5 years I've been on YouTube, hundreds of stories of people who've said they were this close to giving up. And that this hobby gave them something to care about, to breed, to get involved with, to put their energy into. And tell people that. Tell your senators that. Make them feel on a human level these things. I mean, what is the cost? So say invasive species, say invasive fish species, the potential is $2 billion in Florida. Well, what is the cost of, even if 1% of addicts go back to using drugs? 78 grand a year to keep them in prison. The average drug habit of hard drugs, you know, something 50 to 100 grand a year in often stolen money or, you know, sold scams, fraud, all sorts of things like that. So there's that. What is it in the cost of the mom and pop shops that are losing business? So there's that. What is there in the cost of, honestly, think of all the engineers and scientists and creators and patents that exist already. Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. I will post the letter that I'm writing, because it needs to be proofread before I send it anyways, to my senators, on the community tab, and I will also post it on the Facebook group we have. But the other thing I wanted to say, and that I wrote about, is think about our defense industry. So national security. How many inventions can we find on the patent list that cite we looked at the scales of catfish, and we noticed how they overlapped, and we realized that we could make bulletproof vests out of the same overlapping dragon scale technology. So those of you in certain sectors that know where this may apply, you can help be the push, the thrust of the spear, in our analogy of the head of the spear working on this thing, by doing research. We do need research done. This is not a one-time bill. This will come back. People at PETA will make it come back, even if they solved all the economic business going on with this bill and the impact of invasive species. Now, the other thing that is whoops, sorry guys, falling down. So the other thing that's incredibly crucial is the biomimicry, the engineering, the defense. We need somebody to look up, and I was doing it, and actually just by searching biomimicry, 40,000 U.S. patents alone had that in their publication. And so the fact that maybe someone is sitting watching an incredibly unique fish do something, maybe it's going to be mormyrids in the way they talk electronically, or with electronic pulses. Maybe they'll figure out the next 5G or the next way to communicate that's less harmful. Maybe they'll figure out the way to preserve energy. Who knows what we're going to find? Cures to cancer, cures to common ailments. So often in my videos, they're studying a fish because it gives them the ability to research some aspect of biology that isn't available elsewhere. And while, they could counter with, well, there'll be exceptions for universities and research labs, what about citizen scientists? How many people, inventors or CEOs of companies, are going to just be sitting at home looking at their aquarium and maybe inspiration strikes them? So if we can find ways to put numbers on all these weird facets that link to our hobby, it suddenly adds up to millions, if not billions of dollars that potentially might not come into rotation, may not come into existence, let alone the easy to think of common stuff. So we need to really be creative with this also, in the sense that, what is lurking in the Amazon that we have not been allowed to import for years because Brazil doesn't allow imports. Make it very clear that there's already a bunch of regulations that ban fish. Every country has their own laws. A lot of countries, like Brazil, has IBAMA and CITES and the ICU and the IUCN red list and gray list and black list. So we need to impress upon them that there are things in place that have threats that are going to be the same, just as bad, just as severe as what they're suggesting. The difference is they're saying every fish is guilty until it's proved innocent. And big business is going to allow goldfish, guppies, the fish that are already invasively living around the world just fine, they're probably still going to be allowed. So is that really even getting at the heart of the matter? And we're missing out on the money. And we're missing out on the fact that inventions, innovation, maybe domestic violence goes down. They found in prison that fish tanks reduce the amount of violent incidents significantly. So, if we can find some of these facts, that's something really helpful you could do. Look it up, but be able to cite it. And what do we spend on sending cops to domestic violent cases? What do we spend on alcoholism, drunk driving, things like that? And how many people quit and are in the hobby? It's hard to put a number on these things, but they're all angles you can work if you need to tailor your attack, your strategy to yourself. What matters to you, what you're informed about, because there's nothing worse than looking like an idiot and representing a cause in a bad way. But There's also the angle of here's a solution to your problem, here's a concession. That's the compliment sandwich again. And so you can tell them a great way to do it if you get to actually interface and talk on the phone or whatnot is, you know, if you get into a conversation, you say, well, what about the part of the law that makes it illegal to have an animal that could impact agriculture negatively? That actually does seem pretty good, I guess. So we should have something in place like that, shouldn't we? And if they say yes, then you say, well, we do, and it's these 10 laws. And we already have 10 agencies that could potentially enforce this, and they either don't or they do. And if you got some big story on how detrimental the fines and things would be, that's another story that you can say. Now, the other thing is all the extinct species in the wild, all the species that are not allowed to be imported because of the virus that's been going on for 2 years, we have not been getting nearly the species we usually get. So the part of the bill that says that they will whitelist and review a selection of whatever the minimally traded amount of most popular species are. That means that the plecos, the goldfish, the stuff that actually could be a problem, will probably get through, which seems silly, but that could make someone say, well, that's stupid, we need it even stricter. So you have to be careful about that. I mean, pointing out the weaknesses can go against things, but I'm just saying, if you've already got them on your side, that's when, in that Socratic method, then you start building and basically taking their ideas, and you take your ideas and attach it to one of their ideas and spin it so that they came up with it. There's nothing better than that to manipulate people, to win friends and influence. So, I think points of action, I feel like we've covered a lot of different things. You guys are smart. In the comments of this video after the fact, I would love it if people wrote down some angles that they could think of that I haven't mentioned, whether that is DARPA and the defense sector using animals, and maybe it's one type of fish that's only found somewhere and it hasn't been imported lately, but somebody had it as a pet and they realized this fish can create an overlap molecularly in their skin, and that's how we're going to make bulletproof vests or porcelain slab sheets on our military Abrams tanks that shatter. That stuff is all based on animals and biomimicry and studying what they do. So someone could look up things like that and find out some examples of that. The other thing that people could figure out is, well, why don't aquariums and zoos keep these species? That might be something they assume. Your representative is going to assume a number of things, and one thing is pets are a luxury. Pet keepers are not scientists. They think of those people as separate. When the case is, oftentimes many pet owners are also biologists, are also scientists. Many pet owners are not classically trained necessarily, but they're doing science. They're doing work that is sound science. And that's why I like that word, citizen scientist, or citizen, entrepreneur. Whatever it may be, venture capitalist. It depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to a conservative, venture capitalists and things like that, that's great. If you're talking to a socialist person, that's not going to work so well. But instead of chastising your differences, look at your commonalities and use the spear. Use the resources that are out there, the links that are being put out there by people like me and other YouTubers. Use those resources, put them into action with the plan. So, at minimum, I encourage, if you are watching my channel, you're probably nerdy enough and engaged enough to write a personalized letter. Also, sign up to PJAC or ARC, U.S. ARC, and find out when the stuff's going through, and let them write a form letter. The thing is, if you see form letters on your desk, you know how easy it is for people to just say, oh, I want to feel good about myself. I'm going to click this, and that's that. You know, even if it has a section for your own comments, it's so much more powerful to put it in an envelope. Put it in a blue envelope. Draw a fish on the envelope. Write an email and put the header, one of the most, interesting facts you can find. Like, maybe we can find something on mental health and fish tanks. Epileptic kids and autistic kids are however much less likely, I don't remember offhand, but both were groups that were less likely to have behavioral issues when they had an aquarium present. They've done MRIs and they've shown that aquariums actually induce REM-like brainwave patterns. So maybe there is going to be a solution to these big systemic social problems, and you never know where it's going to come from. So the cost-benefit analysis, lay it out for them as though it's at least even. Now, the other thing is, yes, we do need to admit fault if there's fault there. But look, we need people to be doing research on where did each invasive species that's a big problem come from. And then you can say, look, that wasn't because of pet owners. That was because of this zoo had a fire and this place, escaped, or a tornado happened, or a plane crashed, or a truck crashed, whatever it may be. If you can find examples of these things, it really helps say it's not just the pet owners, but that being said, there are a lot of irresponsible pet owners. So maybe part of this would be, instead of spending $150 million a year on this bill, maybe they could put even just $50,000 towards an education campaign, and just require that Petco, PetSmart, any pet store, when you get a fish, gives you a care packet and how to dispose of a dead fish, how to treat a sick fish, all these sorts of things, and that. The other thing is, there's no provisions for what happens to our fish if this law passes. Obviously, they don't have the manpower to come to your house to take your fish. It's not going to be like that. But if you move states, there's a chance they could stop you. Some people say, oh, they're not going to stop people as they go across state lines. Oh, the hell they aren't. In some places, Florida might. Here in Washington State, when you go into California, they stop you at border checks, and they make sure you don't have any fruit. If you do have fruit, they have fruit-sniffing dogs. They have vegetable and fruit-sniffing dogs. And they do random checks. Some days it's not open, but other days it is. And you can get giant fines for what we have up here called an apple maggot quarantine zone. And same with when you enter up into Canada above Washington. So there are chances that this could directly impact people. The other thing is always to look at who is their constituency. Is it independent business owners? Is it big business owners? Is it underserved people of color? Is it a bunch of middle-class white people? Whatever it may be, look at the issues that impact the demographic they know they represent. They obsess over this stuff as elected officials, and they are constantly working on ways to get higher receptions in the polls and in the voting. So thank you so much again, you guys, for all the awesome comments and support. I really hope that in the spear analogy, the tip of the spear, the people who are the professors, the doctors, the legislators, the lawyers, the PJAC lobbyists, the people who are willing to, heck, maybe 10 people are going to get together, organize on Facebook, and say, let's go to Michigan State Capitol and try to speak with our representative. You're not going to go there and chain yourself to anything or make a big scene necessarily, but you're going to go there and say something. Now, if this legislation does pass, that changes everything, and we may need to take it to direct action. If that happens, that's where we get into discussing my arrest history on file. So, there's that. Let's see here. So, thanks again also, Mary, for putting in all the details from the links we have. Really appreciate that. So people know where they can find things. Let's see, Goosenut Maverick says, I figured they won't be actively pursuing people, but that's a big fine getting pulled over in a podunk town during a move for having a huge... Yeah, it's kind of hard to hide a giant fish tank, right? So it's easy for them to get probable cause or reasonable suspicion to get probable cause if they did care to do that. So... it is a possibility that that could happen. Even if that's not the case, though, what happens if all the people who own plecos that they know are going to get big, they think, man, I can't own these anymore. I don't have any other fish left existing in my tank. Like, all my tetras have died 2 years after this thing goes into effect or whatever. And they decide, I'm just going to dump my fish. This could actually lead to more invasive species because there's nowhere to turn it over to. There's nothing said of how to dispose of a fish that is invasive that you have that gets put on the blacklist. So simple things like that, just showing them that this was so ill-conceived of a blank check of a bill that it needs and merits re-examination, that is the biggest thing we can do. Get it on their radar that it just needs to be pulled, or that it needs to be it needs to be changed. Fish stores won't be able to take in blacklisted fish. No, definitely not. And some people say, oh, well, it won't be enforced. Like in Maine right now, there's a big old list of stuff we can't have. It's a lot different, though, when it can't get imported. It creates black markets. Why don't we have people doing research and Home Aquatic Hobbyist says they will tell you to kill it just like fishing when you find an invasive species. Yeah, but what if its belly's full of eggs? Or what if it has a pathogen that wasn't anticipated and you flush it down the toilet and it goes into your store? I mean, so there's how to dispose of it. You're supposed to put it in a compost pile under some lye, basically, is the best way to get rid of it. Throw it in a fire in your backyard in a burn bin, because we all have access to that. But what I'm trying to impress upon you is that you can be any part of the turkey baster spear. On the head of the spear, those people are important, but they don't make a spear work. They don't make it fly straight. They don't give it its energy. They're simply the metal and the people that hold tight, that are specialized, that are focused, that get through there, that find the chinks in the armor. Whereas the people right behind that, they're the researchers, the YouTubers, the people signing petitions, going door to door. And then the people farther back from that, they're the people that are maybe just signing a change.org petition. Maybe they did an autofill on a thing and they agree and they're not that worried about it, but whatever. And then there's the people behind that. Those people are also important. If we can get them engaged, if we can get them to move up one section in the spear of this battle, of this fight, it makes a huge difference. So the people who think, well, I don't want the government telling me that I can't have a chinchilla, or I don't want, find what these people care about. Reach out. We've done almost none of this that I've seen. I've seen some reptile people and some fish people talking, but I challenge you guys, go to a channel that's about find something that's semi-exotic, sugar gliders, or ferrets, or whatever it may be, that there's a good chance that could get banned and restricted. Reach out to them and impress upon them. Use their networks. That is another key thing in social justice movements, in organizing, is to use the leverage of that. So you want to find common ground. You want to reinforce the yes and of when they say something in response to you, and you can take part of it that's right and another part of it that you want to come over to your side. Reinterpret it for them. Help them. Put in fill in the blanks for them. Brian, welcome as a member. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, my friend. Good to have you. All right. Yes, insects will also be on the list. Arachnids, potato bugs, feeder animals might be. Now, the thing that you have to count on realistically is that there will be a lobbyist. There will be backroom dealings with someone or something or other along the lines of, like I said, goldfish, neon blue tetras, cardinal tetras. There's probably going to be a chunk of fish, even in the worst case scenario, that will be allowed, that will get cleared. But what we need to say is, does it make any sense that the one indication in this legislation of what should be banned has to do with only economics and them being imported? So say, okay, plecos, how much do they sell for? $4 to $8, you know, retail for a rubber lip or a common pleco. How much is it costing the state of Florida in damage? You know, so you have to be careful in pointing out those things that hurt your own argument later. But at the same time, it's worth pointing out that wholesale, these things are like 12 cents a piece brought into the country. So how much money is getting made, you know, in the profit? You know, maybe $20 million a year gets made in plecos. Maybe. I doubt it. Yet, what damage do they do to the environment? So, I mean, if you're trying to make an argument of what should be banned, why wouldn't we write legislation about that, or the ones that we have evidence of? We need to make it clear that there is no your facts and my facts. There is truth. There is an objective truth in this world, despite what the last few years of politics seem to indicate on both sides of the arguments. There is an objective truth, and we should use evidence, logic, and calm-headed demeanors to try and sort out what that means, what that is. Now, I need to get up and move because my back is extremely painful, and I've been ranting for over an hour. But do we have any questions? Do we have any anything else that I can help with? I feel like there's a lot of people who've gone over the wording of this bill and things like that. You can find that out there. I did an episode where we went over quite a bit of it. Bentley did an episode that went over quite a bit of it. The Aquarium Guys podcast had an episode which was awesome. Thank you, Robs, for having me on the tail end of that. But they had Bob Likens from PJack on there. Also, Dan's Fish. He had a great thing of this. A lot of people are simply not are not going to they're not going to believe you when you tell them what this potentially bans, how big this legislation is, what it covers. It sounds preposterous. They've never done that. I mean, it'd be like saying, the closest thing we've done that with, I guess, would be food and drugs. You can't call it a drug. But even then, we have vitamins and supplements that don't need approval. They just can't be called a prescription drug and cleared without being proven safe. But, I mean, to me, I want to know how much is the average cost of a invasive impact study. How much does that cost to study? There's a phase 1 and a phase 2. Do we need that for every state, for each species? What about the species that weren't traded in the last year? Like I said, all the CARES species that weren't imported, that are only here because of hobbyists. Things like goodeids or pupfish from around the world that are only going to exist if hobbyists keep them spawning. Talk about some of the amazing breakthroughs that have been made by keeping fish. Like I said, citizen scientists and actual scientists, professors alike, a lot of it is from biomimicry. We can thank bulletproof vests, tank armor, stealth technology, all sorts of things on observing natural phenomena. So, what is it that we are going to be missing out on by banning these amazing, unique, and interesting animals? And is it fair that, I mean, how often are, I mean, just look at, say, cyprinids. So you could say the largest traded class of fish, the cyprinid, or I don't know if it is, but say it is. Um, or the tetras or catfish, for instance. Out of the 20,000 species of freshwater fish, and or 18,000, however you want to classify it, 2/3 of those are threatened in the wild. Out of those species, less than 5,000 are kept in zoos around the world. And that's zoos and research institutes as far as I could find. However, in captivity with humans and hobbyists, 10,000 species at least are reported on import ledgers and things in the last 2 years to exist in captivity. So, who's going to have the record of these creatures when they're gone due to humans or due to invasive species, for that matter? So we need to propose a well thought out and science-based, logic and information backed route of how we can help prevent invasive species in the future, because this bill is going to keep coming back time and time again. I honestly don't think PETA has enough people backing it. There aren't enough people who think that no one should have pets to get through legislation if we can cover the concerns that have plagued our hobby for years. They keep coming out. They're the skeletons in our closet. And even if we get this knocked out completely and they just drop it from the bill, we need to come up with proactively, our spear of activism needs to have people coming up with solutions to these issues. Needs to come up with, well, maybe it's the fact that you have a permit, and if a species is on, maybe we have a gray list or something, and if it's on that list, you just simply need to show that you're going to be able to house and feed it and sign that you are aware of its needs and yada yada, and it won't be transported to states where it's invasive, something like that, you know, whatever it may be. So there's no plausible way that you could claim you didn't know what you were doing, and then when it is those laws are broken, we nail people to the wall with it. I mean, throw the book at them when they're well thought out laws like that. I mean, that's one option. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I am just saying that I have been fighting for various political causes that generally have support on both sides of the aisle when you get down to it, and this will too. But people are going to go to their side and see what their constituents think. So we need to avoid making this a partisan issue of, oh, that darn Republican Rubio suggested it, or oh, Pelosi's office drafted the first version of it years ago, or it's in a Democrat's bill. We need to de-escalate that rhetoric because, like I said, that was the second rule of influencing people, debates, and improv, and the Socratic argument method is you don't call your opponent an idiot. You don't get into blaming them for the deeds of others who are just happen to be aligned with them. You want to uplift the people who you're talking to, who you're informing. You want to inform them. You want to make them think they came to the conclusion that is the right one. You know, it's fine to play dumb if they say, well, what about this? And it's right on par with what you want. That's a brilliant idea. I would really endorse that. Now, this is all assuming you can get through to someone. But like I said, I am, thanks, Patrick. He also says anyone can go to US ARC webpage and read the breakdown of what this bill does. Yeah, the Amazonas article that I provided a link to has a link to that and to PJAC and to a whole bunch of other things. But I also linked in there your representatives. Like I said, yes, it's done being voted on in the House, but the House still is a big political body that has influence and it may draft this bill again. So it doesn't hurt if you have the extra 10 minutes the next night after you've written your letter to a senator another night. Now, the other thing is, yes, it wouldn't hurt to tell the Republican people in the Senate that represent you, if you're in a Republican state, it wouldn't hurt to still make all these same arguments and to say, please vote against this or remove that section. But most of them are not going to vote for it anyways. So really, write Democratic Party member senators, because they're going to be the ones who are most likely to blanket vote it through without even knowing this piece exists in it or caring. And it's so crazy that 4 pages or 1 page if you look at the other summary, 6 if you kind of count the Lacey excerpts that you need to read, that at most 6 pages out of 2,971 pages of this stupid giant act have to do with this. Whereas, you know, other people may say, if you say no to the creates bill, that sounds like you're against those 267 pages or whatever it is, 265 pages. Not that you're against the actual problems that are in the few pages of this. So also you want to make sure to clarify that you care about the, if it's to Republicans, you can say just take down the bill. If it's to the Democrats that are championing this bill because it has things that are important to them, tell them to remove that piece of the pie and to vote on it later, to give it more thought. Even if you need to say, we need to do this later because we need to put more restrictions in or more thought on those restrictions, more guidance of what to do, more science needs to be done. We need to, tell them that this isn't good enough. This doesn't clarify things. This doesn't protect our wildlife, which is true. It doesn't. It's a very poorly written bill that's a blank check for whoever gets it, and that could be someone that you don't know who it is later. So in any case, this bill's been up several times, and similar legislation has, and it hasn't made it. However, it's never been attached to this big of a bill before with such unilateral support from one of the parties that happens to be the party that's in power, that happens to be probably going to vote on this before the midterms, which could change the standing of those things. If nothing else, I mean, they need to make it so that you can breed these species that are endangered or something like that, or that there is a provision for universities and funding, because it does no good if there's no funding for any of this. Neither does any of the enforcement, honestly. The other thing is, honestly, how are they going to train? So just fish alone, 32,000 species of fish. Insects, I don't know how many species, like 100,000. I mean, there's, depending on who you ask, 4 to 7 million species of different insects, plants, and by the way, plants are covered in the Lacey Act, so who knows what applies to aquatic plants, but they are a massive problem invasively also. So who knows what's going to be covered, but how are they ever going to train people to identify these things? How is someone going to know the difference between a rainbow fish and a friggin' dace or a shiner if they're not a fish person? Let alone which rainbow fish, let alone which creek or system it is or collection point. It's absurd to think that they would ever have the ability to know that. Even fish experts would not be able to do that. All to the point also that, okay, 350,000 species of beetles alone. Okay, exactly. Like ants, I know is something like that too. So it's absurd that we're just casting a net on all this and saying, that's it. Those are all going to be limited, and you guys sort it out. Um, but yeah, houseplants, that's another thing, exactly. So in any case, guys, I hope that I answered some questions, maybe inspired you guys. Please, please, please do something more than just sign up for a newsletter or an alert. We really need you guys to join as the tip of the spears, to get up higher in that movement and to make a dent, to make a difference, to help lead those people who are sitting at home who kind of agree, and get them talking about it. Get other pet communities on YouTube or other pet clubs. Who knows? Maybe it's a kennel society. Maybe it's the fact that Bengals or servals or other cats that might be considered exotic because they have part wild. What about hybrid species? I mean, nothing is outlined or clear in this. And we already have laws at the state level, the county level, the city level, the international level. It's just crazy. Why can't we find an existing framework to sort this out? It doesn't make sense to me. So thank you, you guys. Please stay informed, stay active, stay excited, and stay positive, because also doom and gloom is never fun to be around. And I hope that maybe I've given you guys, I can't get my coat on my own. I hope that maybe you guys are maybe a little empowered. The other thing you can do, if you can spark someone else to do as much work as you were going to, you just did your part, right? So what if you spark 5 or 6 other people to go do as much as you would have done? We have the power to really make this a domino effect thing, and we need to do that. So thanks, guys. Thanks, members, for those of you who have joined the community today. I really appreciate it. Mary, thanks for joining, or for throwing up all the links, and you guys for the comments and all the other stuff that is being talked about in the chat. Really great points. I really appreciate it. On a side note, I'm probably going to be changing my information on the what's it called, Aquatic Arts secret code, but for now it's still the same. It's history secret, all caps, and then 15 for 15% off. Dry goods have free shipping right now, free shipping totally. So get your catappa leaves. I just did a thing on guava leaves because I thought, hey, they've got free shipping right now, and they're like, I think it's like $14 for like 30 or 25 leaves. So it's a pretty good deal. And if you give them, if you get that, you'll get the free shipping. You can get a couple other leaves or foods too. Do it separate from any live orders, but then you can use my code and get 15% off. If you've already used that code, you can still get 10% off if you use it again. Plus, then we use those names to draw for gift card giveaways later too. So there's a chance you could win 50 or $100 like a lot of you guys have over the last few years with the channel here. The last thing I want to say is that to my friends and viewers in Ukraine, please, please, please be safe. It would be a good idea this weekend to take a long weekend. Russia is saying right now that the Ukrainians are on the offensive, which the U.S. military assumed that they would be manufacturing a reason for war 2 days ago. Then they film video of people leaving while being bombed, civilians, supposedly in a region that's under control of rebels. Well, it turns out the metadata shows that it was 2 days ago, and they claimed it was today, and they claimed that it was this big offensive by Ukraine. Well, satellite footage also shows that it was the Russians firing the artillery in the first place. So just keep an eye on it. But for those of you guys in Ukraine, hang tight. My thoughts are really with you. It's always the civilians that get the worst of it. And this is going to be a war that's either going to be over very quickly and Russia's going to take over Kiev, or it's going to be very protracted. And the only way to win is to make it costly to Russia, like Afghanistan or Vietnam. And that's very sad. That's where most of our Marimo mossballs come from. Not a ton of fish come from there, but some of our fish are farmed there and things. But obviously that's nothing compared to the lives. So I just wanted to put out a prayer, so to speak, or a thought for those people. We're worrying about fish right now, and they are worrying about bombs landing on their house or on their children. So important to keep things in perspective. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful night, and use those links, use those assets, build a network, team up with other pet hobbyists, and let's get this stopped, and let's get legislation for the future that cuts off more of these asinine threats to our hobby, as well as solving the real problems that do exist because of our hobby, as well as not because of our hobby, but due to the creatures in it, and zoos or importers or plane crashes or train derailments with a box of bees or whatever caused certain issues. But again, information is power. All throughout this video, I've listed ways you could be doing research to help us find factual information that we can cite and use in all of our custom letters. You can write more than one letter, and you can write letters to any senator. But they're not going to listen unless they think that there's a vote on the line. You have influence in your community and you control other people's vote. That's an important thing too. So if you're the head of your PTA, you're the head of your YouTube channel, whatever it may be, say I have 50,000 views on my channel. Add up all your total views and say, that these people, if they know that you didn't represent them and they're in my area, whatever, they're not going to vote for you again. And, you don't need to threaten them, but basically you need to tell them, and they'll read between the lines of what it is that you offer, whether economically or in alliances of unions or in business or whatever it may be in the future. Thank you again, everybody. Lurkers, replay crew, you guys rock. Share this if you think it's helpful to others to see, and I will talk to everybody later. I've talked to Bob Likens, and hopefully I think we might have him on the channel too, as long as he doesn't do too many more talks, because he is covering most of what we would talk about. But I do kind of want to talk about the shortcomings of PJAC and where we can fill in on that. And right now, he himself said on Dan's Fish the other night that they can't do this the typical way of backroom dealings with, people who know each other and getting things pulled quickly and lawsuits and things like that necessarily. They need a grassroots groundswell effort. So your letters, your individual time does matter. Put it in a colorful envelope, put it in nice letterhead, whatever it may be. Get the attention of those people. Call them. Make an impact. All right, guys, I'm done. I'll talk to you later. Have a wonderful evening. And thank you so much, members, super chatters, all you guys, for all that you do. Talk to you later. Bye.